The moment Sarah Chen saw the elderly woman collapse on the subway platform, time fractured into 1,000 terrible possibilities. The screech of an approaching train, the indifferent shuffle of rush-hour feet, the way the woman's gray hair spread across the dirty concrete like a halo. It all collided in Sarah's chest with a force that knocked the breath from her lungs. She was already moving before her mind caught up, her briefcase clattering to the ground, her polished heels stumbling over themselves as she pushed through the crowd that had somehow learned to look away from suffering as easily as breathing. "Someone call 911!" Sarah's voice cracked through the station as she dropped to her knees beside the woman, her hands trembling as they searched for a pulse. The woman's skin felt like paper beneath her fingers, translucent and fragile, and Sarah found herself whispering prayers she hadn't spoken since childhood. Around her, the world continued its relentless march, people checking their watches, sighing at the delay, their faces masks of practiced inconvenience. But Sarah saw none of it. All she could see was her own, grandmother's face superimposed. Over this, strangers, remembering the day nobody had stopped to help. Nana, when she'd fallen outside the grocery store, how she'd lain there for 20 minutes before someone finally called for help. The paramedics arrived in a blur of fluorescent uniforms and efficient movements. They worked on the woman, Mrs. Dorothy Patterson, according to the ID in her wallet, with practiced precision while Sarah held her hand, refusing to let go even when they told her she should probably step back. Dorothy's eyes fluttered open once, clouded with confusion and fear, and Sarah squeezed her fingers gently. "You're going to be okay," she promised, though she had no right to make such a promise. "I'm right here. You're not alone." By the time Sarah finally made it to her office 3 hours later, she'd missed the presentation that was supposed to seal her promotion. Her boss, Mr. Hendricks, stood in the conference room doorway with his arms crossed and his disappointment written across his face in sharp lines. Sarah tried to explain. The woman, the ambulance, the way Dorothy had looked at her with such desperate gratitude, but the words felt inadequate against the corporate machinery of deadlines and quarterly reports. "I understand these things happen, Sarah," Hendricks said, his tone suggesting he understood nothing at all. "But we needed you here. The clients were expecting you. There will be other emergencies, but opportunities like this don't come twice." Sarah nodded. 2 weeks passed. Sarah threw herself back into work, attempting to rebuild what she'd lost. She stayed late, arrived early, volunteered for projects nobody wanted. But something had shifted inside her that day on the subway platform, like a tectonic plate sliding into a new position. She found herself noticing things she'd trained herself to ignore: the homeless man who slept in the doorway of her building, the single mother in her apartment complex, struggling with grocery bags and a crying toddler, the teenager at the coffee shop whose eyes held the particular exhaustion of someone working 2 jobs while trying to finish high school. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, forwarded through the hospital. Sarah almost didn't open it, assuming it was a bill or some kind of liability waiver, but the handwriting on the envelope was shaky and elegant, the cursive of someone who'd learned to write when penmanship still mattered. "Dear Sarah," it began, "I don't know if you'll remember me. I'm the woman you saved on the subway. The doctors tell me that if you hadn't acted so quickly, I wouldn't have survived the heart attack. I've been trying to find the words to thank you, but everything I write seems insufficient for the gift you gave me. Not just my life, but the knowledge that strangers still care for one another in this vast, lonely city." Sarah's hands shook as she continued reading. Dorothy wrote about her life, about losing her husband 2 years ago, about her children who'd moved across the country for their careers and rarely called. She wrote about feeling invisible, about how she'd started to believe that maybe it didn't matter much, whether she was here or not. "And then you saw me," she wrote. "You looked at me like I was your own family. You held my hand. Do you know how long it had been since someone held my hand?" The letter concluded with an invitation to tea at Dorothy's apartment in Queens. Sarah stared at the address for a long time, thinking about all the reasons she should decline. She was busy, behind on work, still trying to claw her way back into Hendricks' good graces. She didn't have time for tea with a stranger. But Dorothy wasn't a stranger anymore, was she? The following Saturday, Sarah found herself standing outside a modest brick building in Flushing, clutching a bakery box of macarons and second-guessing everything. When Dorothy opened the door, her face transformed with joy, and Sarah felt something in her chest crack open. The apartment was small but immaculate, filled with photographs and books and the lingering scent of jasmine tea. Over the next few months, those Saturday tea visits became the fixed point around which Sarah's week revolved. Dorothy told stories about her youth, about immigrating from Ireland as a young bride, about building a life from nothing but hope and stubborn determination. She asked Sarah questions nobody else bothered to ask, not about her job or her career trajectory, but about her dreams, her fears, what made her laugh until her stomach hurt. Slowly, Sarah began to understand that she'd been as lonely as Dorothy, just in different ways, buried under ambition and busyness instead of age and silence. Through Dorothy, Sarah met others. Mrs. Kim from 3B, who was caring for her disabled son alone. Marcus, the veteran from the first floor who couldn't sleep through the night and sat in the courtyard counting stars. Elena, the undocumented housekeeper who cleaned office buildings at night and sent every penny home to her daughter in Honduras. They became Sarah's Saturday people, gathering in Dorothy's living room for tea and conversation, a makeshift family stitched together from the city's forgotten corners. Sarah started bringing her legal expertise to the table, helping Elena navigate immigration paperwork, connecting Marcus with VA resources, researching options for Mrs. Kim's son. She wasn't saving lives anymore, but maybe she was doing something more sustained, more meaningful. The promotion she'd lost stopped stinging quite so much. Then Dorothy got sick again. Pneumonia this time, her body too fragile to fight it effectively. Sarah sat beside her hospital bed night after night, watching machines breathe for the woman who'd taught her how to really live. The doctor spoke in careful tones about quality of life and difficult decisions. Dorothy's children finally came, flying in from Seattle and Phoenix, their guilt palpable as they realized how much time they'd let slip away. On what turned out to be Dorothy's last lucid evening, she pulled Sarah close, her grip surprisingly strong. "You think you saved me that day on the subway," she whispered, her Irish accent stronger than usual. "But sweetheart, you've got it backwards. You saved yourself. I just gave you a reason to remember who you really are." Dorothy died on a Sunday morning, with her children on one side and Sarah on the other. At the funeral, Sarah was stunned to see how many people came. The Saturday group, of course, but also neighbors Dorothy had helped over the years, former students from her teaching days, strangers whose lives she'd touched with small kindnesses they'd never forgotten. Sarah realized that Dorothy had been doing all along what Sarah was just learning, seeing people, really seeing them and choosing to care. The reading of Dorothy's will brought another surprise. She'd left Sarah a small inheritance, not money but something more valuable. A leather journal filled with names and addresses, stories and needs. "My dear Sarah," the accompanying note read, "I'm giving you my most precious possession, the people I've loved and worried about. Please keep seeing them, keep caring. The world has enough people chasing success. It needs more people chasing connection." Sarah kept the journal. She kept the Saturday teas, rotating through different apartments. She kept noticing people, stopping when someone needed help, choosing humanity over convenience even when it cost her. She never did get that promotion, but eventually she left the corporate job altogether, going back to school for social work and accepting a position at a non-profit that served the elderly. Years later, when Sarah had gray in her own, hair and a reputation as the woman who actually answered when people called for help, someone asked her why she did it, why she spent her time and energy on strangers who couldn't advance her career or improve her status. Sarah thought about Dorothy's hand in hers on that subway platform, about the way their lives had braided together from that single moment of choice. "Because someone has to remember that we're all connected," she said finally. "Because kindness isn't a transaction or a strategic move. It's just what we owe each other for sharing this strange, brief, beautiful existence. And because once upon a time, an extraordinary woman taught me that the most important title we can earn in life isn't CEO or manager or director. It's just this, someone who stops, someone who sees, someone who cares. That's the only title worth having. That's how I want people to title her when I'm gone, as someone who stopped." In the end, that's exactly what they did.